Welcome to Black Health, a weekly talk show discussing medical issues afflicting and impacting the Black South Florida community. Now introducing our host, Dr. Michelle Kirwan Blythewood.
Good day, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am Dr. Michelle Kirwan Blythewood. I am a board-certified pediatrician and the Chief Medical Officer at the Pediatric and Family Health and Wellness Center in Miami Gardens, Florida. And welcome back to another episode of Black Health, brought to you by the Health Foundation of South Florida. And today we are talking about slavery. You might say, why would we be talking about slavery on Black Health? Well, there is a form of modern day slavery called human trafficking. And with us to talk about that today, we have Victor Williams. Victor.
Hello, Michelle. Great to see you.
Hello. Great to see you as well. Welcome to Black Health. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm very much looking forward to this conversation. This is a topic that just really needs to be spoken about more and more. It's insane to me that there is a form of modern day slavery that is so prominent and throughout the world. So we're going to jump into that, but I do want to take a moment to introduce you. Victor Williams is an internationally renowned and respected anti-human trafficking advocate. He retired from law enforcement with over 34 years of domestic and international experience. Joined the U.S. Customs Service, which later became the Department of Homeland Security, later was assigned to the Department of Homeland Security Investigations, special agent in charge of Miami office's Human Trafficking Group. In 2012, he was appointed the coordinator for the South Florida Human Trafficking Force. And in 2023, he launched the Quest to Freedom organization. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about Quest to Freedom.
Yeah, so when I retired in 2018, I bought the domain Quest to Freedom with hopes to do something. But as life has it, I had other things I had to do, right? So when I retired, I ended up working for an organization called Erase Child Trafficking, where I traveled around the country educating law enforcement on this issue. And then I had an opportunity to do 2 years team security for the Atlanta Hawks, which was a great experience, but it really wasn't feeding my soul. And when I left the Hawks to come back to Miami, the state of Georgia got funding for human trafficking, and I ended up doing a year as a human trafficking coordinator for the state of Georgia. I came back to Miami 2021, and I did some work on myself, some of the stuff that we're going to talk about, trauma and things like that, and realized that I had experienced not only the traumas that I brought from my family life, I hadn't dealt with the traumas that I had been dealing with working with human trafficking victims for the last 14 years. And so after I did the work on myself, Quest to Freedom Inc. was, really came together January 2023. And what we do is educate people on the culture of human trafficking. We partner with other organizations because we realize no one does this work alone. But the main thing that we really want to do is raise enough money to be able to register with the national hotline to help victims in their immediate needs like transportation, needs like a hotel when they need it. Because sometimes when law enforcement come across victims, they don't have places to put them. So we like to fill some of these gaps. So right now, that's just the box that we're living in.
Amazing. Let's jump right into it. Part one of a two-part series on human trafficking. And I want to start with the history. Let's talk a little bit about the history of human trafficking.
So the United States got its first human trafficking laws in the year 2000, when the United Nations gathered all the countries together in Palermo, Italy, and say, hey, we need to address our human trafficking issues. And that's when the United States came up with Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. There's been some modifications throughout the years, but in that act, the first act, it defined human trafficking and then gave us kind of like a footprint on how to deal with it. So when we look at, and I know the question is coming, but so when we look at the definition of human trafficking, there's three elements of human trafficking that one of the elements must be there. That's force, fraud, and coercion. Force is obviously I beat you to make you do what I want. Coercion is the threat of hurting you, somebody you love. And I always say, if you have a need that you feel is so detriment to yourself, be careful who you're asking to help you that, because you could be exploited. But what are those needs? Those needs are food, housing, and then sometimes drugs. So those can be an issue. So when you look at
Jobs.
coercion, yes, when you look at coercion, that's the other element. And then fraud. Hey, we live in Miami. Come to Miami, be a model, be a singer. And when you get here, you realize that ain't happening. And it's usually about force and coercion that they keep you, right? And I'll finish with this. The ways that the TVPA gave us how to look at this and address it, we address it from prevention, which is a lot of education that we do. That's how we look at it. Protection of victims. It's called the 3 Ps: protection of victims and prosecution of perpetrators. So those are your 3 Ps. And I'll finish quickly with this. There's actually 5 Ps now, because we realize, again, it's not part of the law, but the 4th P was partnership. Can't do this. You can't work in this space alone. And then just this year, a 5th P was added: policy, because we realize to change culture, you got to have policies and laws to support what you're trying to do.
What are the different forms of human trafficking? And actually, I think we have a slide that we can put up about that. But I think a lot of people don't realize that there are many different forms of human trafficking.
Yeah, and if you could put up that slide, I really like it, because sometimes you get caught up in the work and you forget certain things. So I'll save the labor part for last. Everybody thinks about human trafficking. The first thing they go to is sex trafficking, right? And normally that's what we see. And the reason we only see it because that's what we're looking for. You have domestic servitude. That can be something where I can hire a maid. Sometimes in different communities, they can afford a servant or a maid to come work for them. And they realize that people in that space are mistreated and could be a form of human trafficking. Child soldiers, I totally don't talk about that much, because that's not something we see in America, but that is a form of human trafficking. But I do like the fact that you put up forced marriages. That adds millions and millions of children that nobody ever thinks about: forced marriages. And I doubt if a lot of people know, we got about 5 or 7 states in America that will let a 12-year-old marry an adult with the parents' permission. So that's something that we haven't looked at or talk about that much. But I saved labor for last. And the reason I saved labor for last, because labor trafficking is 60 to 70% of all trafficking. And that's where it really involves us. Because, I have friends sometimes say, hey, Vic, I don't go to strip clubs and I don't buy sex workers. Why do I need to know about human trafficking? And so my response to that is, because if you own a cell phone, you can buy food and you can buy clothes. You have a minimum of 40 to 60 slaves working for you. So we can get more into that, but labor trafficking is where we're all involved. And the more we know about the products we buy, the more we can be able to address that issue.
So, which is the most prevalent form of trafficking? And I believe we have a slide for that, a graphic for that, between sex and labor and so on. Which is the most prevalent?
Well, labor is, but we talk more about sex, right? But labor, again, is 60 to 70% of all trafficking, because it involves us all.
Okay, wow. So, how many people are victims of human trafficking worldwide? Florida, United States, Miami. Throw some figures at us.
So I like the slide that you just had up, the 49.6 million people, because and it's so hard sometimes. One of the things that I advocate for in this space is that we put human trafficking on police reports. 2 main reasons why we need to do that: we get better numbers, and we're forcing all law enforcement, not just the guys and ladies that are working in human trafficking task forces. We force all officers to learn about human trafficking. And so when we look at Florida, Florida's number 3. You have California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia are your first top states in America. And the one thing that those states all have in common, again, going to labor trafficking, is agriculture. All four of those states has a big, huge agriculture population that they, need help with. When I was working for Georgia, we found that Georgia was number 2 in the country receiving the HB2 visas. These are visas that farmers get to bring in farm workers to help out for them. And Georgia was number 2 in receiving those. So, the numbers are so hard. I hate and the reason we get Florida, California, Texas, and Florida, Georgia, number 4. We use the statistics from the national hotline, which is run by an organization called PolarisProject.org. And the only reason we use them and their numbers aren't 100% is because they base their numbers on the calls that they get, right?
Yeah.
So those states are large. They got a lot of agriculture, but we got to find better ways to get numbers. And the only way we can do that is to train people.
So Vic, give us a second. We do need to take a quick commercial break and pay some bills. You're watching Black Health, brought to you by the Health Foundation of South Florida. We are here with Vic Williams from Quest to Freedom. We'll be right back and talking more about human trafficking. Please stay tuned.
The sound of your heart can tell us so much. At Baptist Health Heart and Vascular Care, we listen closely to diagnose and treat simple to complex cardiac and vascular conditions. Our team of multidisciplinary physicians utilizes the latest treatments and minimally invasive techniques so that you can get back to what you heart most. Welcome to Innovative Heart and Vascular Care.
I grew up down here in South Florida, so for me, it's a little bit more personal.
For the Mesman & Dover Law Firm, it's about community.
For us, South Florida's our home. You all are our people.
Our family, our future.
The difference we'll make for you, your loved ones, your kids, matters. Because to us, it's personal.
If you need us, call us 24/7 at 866-954-MORE.
That's 866-954-6673. The Mesman & Dover Law Firm, youraccidentattorneys.com.
Help comes in many forms. As a Miami-Dade County bus operator, you can help your community, help those in need, and even help yourself. Operators have the opportunity to earn more than $50,000 a year plus built-in overtime, earn more than 13 paid holidays and vacation days, and take advantage of the tuition reimbursement program. Plus, qualified new drivers will receive a $5,000 sign-on bonus. Become a driving force in our community. Apply now at miamidade.gov/busdriver.
Welcome back to Black Health, brought to you by the Health Foundation of South Florida. We are talking about human trafficking today with Victor Williams. Thank you again, Vic, for joining us. So how prevalent is human trafficking in the Black community, especially amongst women and children?
So the reason why it's so prevalent, because, culture again, when I first had my human trafficking lesson, I was in Botswana, Africa, at the International Law Enforcement Academy. And when I heard the word modern day slavery in America, I'm like, okay, I'm African American. Slavery's still in America. But the one thing that I wasn't thinking about was prostitution and pimping. Prostitution and pimping has been a part of our culture. I'm 60 years old. So as far back as I can remember, it's always been there. So when you talk about the music that we listen to in our community, right, they trap houses, things like that, it's almost like, we're celebrating and glorifying this. When I get to talk to kids, I'm like, kids, you ever heard the word pimp? Is a pimp good or bad? Oh, pimps are cool. Why? Because they got a lot of girls and money. And then when I explain to them how they get what they're doing to the girls to get the money, then they go, oh, they have second thoughts about that. But we're not educating enough. So it's very prevalent in our poor communities for sure.
I was listening to something on human trafficking, and correct me if I am wrong, you are the expert, but they were saying that white women are the most expensive for a buyer to buy. then I think Asian and maybe Hispanic women, and then Black women were the cheapest form of slave to buy.
Yeah,
Was there truth to that?
I'm pretty
Because then I
sure.
can imagine, the cheapest one is going to be sold the most,
Listen,
perhaps.
we can get into the weeds in this, and yeah, I mean, look at our culture. You know, it just natural culture. If you bring an alien here and you put them somewhere in the U.S., what will we think? White is right, brown is bad. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? That is part of our culture. When you see things, just looking at billboards, what you see on TV, right? So it's probably some truth to that. We really don't get in those weeds, like that, but definitely there's some truth to that.
So what is the typical age range of individuals affected by trafficking?
Again, we're throwing out numbers, and I really don't like, because I tell you, when I retired in 2018, the FBI, Homeland Security, U.S. Marshal Service, they do what they call a roundup, where they hit the streets. They normally find a lot of victims, arrest a lot of people. And when I retired in 2018, the youngest victim that they found for trafficking was a 3-month-old baby.
Oh my God.
Yes. But we normally see that those ages, what you got right there, from 9 to 17. That is a perfect statistics. And I'm not sure where that source come from, but those are the numbers that we
This is
normally.
the Counter Trafficking Collaborative,
Yeah, they're
CTDC.
yeah, and they're right on with their numbers pretty much.
And what is the oldest that you've seen trafficked?
Oh, wow. I've seen a 70-year-old grandmother, but she was labor trafficked in a servitude situation, right? So
Okay.
I know when you say 70 years old, sex, no, this was a labor trafficking, a servitude situation, where this woman came from Brazil, and she came thinking she was going to help, a family member friend out, and ended up being trapped here for over 20 years serving that family.
Wow. And victims are males, females, both. And where is this? Inner cities, suburbs, big cities like New York, Miami, LA, or all 50 states? Where do we see that in males and females?
No, it's everywhere, and it's both males and females. Of course, we get more numbers in the males. I mean, the females, because again, we're going back to culture. For instance, someone is not gay. Nothing wrong with loving the person who you want to love, but if I'm not gay and I'm a male caught up in a human trafficking situation, meaning sex, who am I going to tell? What stigma is that going to give to me when we put people down for who they choose to love, right? Again, that's all culture. That's why when we educate people on this space, we talk about the culture that feeds it in all different areas.
So, what is the economic scale of trafficking? How significant is it of an industry?
There are experts still saying, drugs number one in the country, human trafficking is number two. And I disagree. I think this is the number one crime in the world, because everybody that buys has a cell phone, buy food, buy clothes, don't buy drugs, right? But we're all connected if we have those things. So, the State Department puts out 150 billion plus. We think those numbers are higher. There's been numbers like 90 million, in America, place to capture numbers.
Yeah. So you broke up a little bit, but this is a billion-dollar, million-dollar, billion-dollar industry.
Oh yeah. So like I said, worldwide, the State Department puts out $150 billion industry plus.
Okay.
And then in the US, it goes like 90 million,
Okay.
or
Thank you.
more.
Sorry, you were breaking up just a little bit there. So let's talk a little bit about the perpetrators. Who fits this profile? Who is the buyer? Who is the seller? Who are the perpetrators in this picture?
So when
What do they
people
look
ask,
like? Are these average everyday? Are these, doctors and lawyers and politicians and police officers, or is this a different socioeconomic class? Who are these perpetrators?
so that's a great question, because I'll start here. A lot of people ask, where do human trafficking victims come from? And I tell them, human trafficking victims and traffickers start in homes all around the world, from trauma that they receive from their home. Unresolved trauma creates vulnerability. And now because of new laws that add, like when you're seeking to have sex with a child online and you make an attempt to meet with that child, you can now be charged for human trafficking. Now, that doesn't make you the trafficker, but that makes you part of you get charged with a human trafficking charge. So yes, you can get doctors, law enforcement, all kind of people part. But I like to let people know a lot of times this is familiar. Family members trafficking their own family members. Usually the trafficking victim knows the person that's trafficking them, so it involves everybody. There's nobody in our community immune from this.
So we do actually need to take another quick commercial break. And then I want to ask you how victims are recruited, because I think that's a very important thing for people to understand. So let's take a brief pause. You are watching Black Health, brought to you by the Health Foundation of South Florida. And we are talking with Vic Williams from Quest to Freedom. We are talking about human trafficking, modern day slavery. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
The sound of your heart can tell us so much. At Baptist Health Heart and Vascular Care, we listen closely to diagnose and treat simple to complex cardiac and vascular conditions. Our team of multidisciplinary physicians utilizes the latest treatments and minimally invasive techniques so that you can get back to what you heart most. Welcome to Innovative Heart and Vascular Care.
I grew up down here in South Florida, so for me, it's a little bit more personal.
For the Mesman and Dover Law Firm, it's about community.
For us, South Florida's our home. You all are our people.
Our family, our future.
The difference we'll make for you, your loved ones, your kids, matters, because to us, it's personal.
If you need us, call us 24/7 at 866-954-MORE.
That's 866-954-6673. The Mesman and Dover Law Firm, youraccidentattorneys.com.
Help comes in many forms. As a Miami-Dade County bus operator, you can help your community, help those in need, and even help yourself. Operators have the opportunity to earn more than $50,000 a year plus built-in overtime, earn more than 13 paid holidays and vacation days, and take advantage of the tuition reimbursement program. Plus, qualified new drivers will receive a $5,000 sign-on bonus. Become a driving force in our community. Apply now at miamidade.gov/busdriver.
Welcome back to Black Health. We are talking about human trafficking with Victor Williams. Victor, I want to know how people, women, children, males, are recruited. I was watching a documentary on prostitution some years ago, and it was striking to me that they had on I guess a pimp, you would call them, whose face was fully available. It wasn't covered or anything. And they asked how he recruited. And he said he would go to the mall, and he said if he would tell a young lady, "You're beautiful." And if she looked and said, "Thank you," and kept walking, he would leave her alone. But if they dropped their head and said, "No, I'm not," that was his person. And that was so shocking to me that somebody could do that. So to talk to me, I know that's going to be part of probably what you say. Talk to me about the recruitment.
So, a lot of times people think, it's the white van, and every day somebody is missing in America, and that is part of it. But the easiest way to recruit is, again, it starts at home. When I meet with parents, I'm like, parents, have relationships with your children that they can come talk to you about everything. And that means you can't be reacting when they tell you something you don't want to know, because they're not going to talk to you. I'm like, parents, deal with your trauma. Because if you're not dealing with your trauma, you're passing it on to your children, generational trauma. And so victims are created just like traffickers are created in homes from unresolved trauma creates vulnerability. Now, both people are brought up in the same family, and you can have two people raised in the same family, and each person, it affects differently. So going to your point, the child that's very like not feeling good about themselves, very insecure, they are the easy targets. So when traffickers are, they're going to befriend you, they're going to tell you you're pretty, they're going to buy you stuff, they're going to really make you, and it's a funny thing, because when I get to talk to parents and children in this situation, especially survivors, and we're parents, we want to go out, we want to work hard, we want to provide our kids with the best. So that means a lot of time from our kids, because when you go and ask those kids what was mostly missing or what did they wanted, all they wanted was our attention. All they wanted was our attention. So this is what traffickers are giving them. They're giving them what they're not getting at home. That's why I'm saying, parents, you got to reframe your relationship with your children to not make them vulnerable, that they go out in the streets looking for something. They should be able to get all that at home. So when they're not getting attention, they'll find it through a negative way.
So, Victor, there's so much to talk about with human trafficking, and we are at the end of our time. But the good news is there is going to be a part 2. The next episode of Black Health after this one will be part 2 on human trafficking. So we will wrap up this show now. I want to say thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to our next conversation. There's still so much to talk about, and the intro to part 2 is going to be about social media and its involvement in human trafficking. So that's a conversation that I really want to have, especially as a pediatrician. I battle social media every day with that conversation with young people. So again, thank you, Victor. Any closing words you'd like to say before we end for this show?
No, I want to just thank you for this opportunity, and we could probably have a part 4 of this, because this can go really deep.
And we might need to consider that. So you are watching Black Health, brought to you by the Health Foundation of South Florida. Thank you for joining us today. This is such an important topic, human trafficking, and please come back for part 2 with Victor Williams, Quest to Freedom, Human Trafficking. We'll see you next time.